Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us on our lab webinar, How to Navigate a Complex Global SuccessFactors Rollout. My name is Abe Regas, and I'm the SAP Practice Leader for North America at MicroExcel. We're excited you're able to join us today. Today's webinar is geared to provide insight and real lessons learned from our experiences of conducting global rollouts of the SuccessFactors solution set for our customers. We hope to provide some best practices and what to avoid to ensure that the needs of the organization from a global perspective are met. Some of this trending information may already be familiar to you, but I wanted to ensure everyone has a common understanding. Leading us today is Hisham Moudin, MicroExcel's HCM Practice Leader. Hisham has an extensive career in HR advisory and consulting with over 22 years in the field. He's currently our HCM Practice Leader for MicroExcel and is responsible for overseeing the services portfolio of the practice. He is a sought-after advisor for his vast knowledge of large, complex SAP SuccessFactors and HR technology implementations. Before Hisham jumps into the presentation, there's just a few housekeeping items. This presentation will be made available on demand a few days after this webinar, and you'll be alerted when it is available. There's also a Q&A portion at the end of the webinar, so please send us your questions during the webinar using the questions box on the side panel, and we'll get to those at the end. Thanks again for joining, and now I'll turn it over to Hisham. Hisham, over to you.
Thank you, Abe. Hello, everyone. So today the objective of the webinar is really to discuss about the global deployments. And our agenda today is really looking at the objectives first of the global deployment. We will look into the key success factors of it. Then we'll look into how through these key success factors we have, of course, the executive sponsorship. We'll go through it, the change management part. How do we set up the base system configuration for successful implementation? Also, how do we define our data dictionary? And then basically we'll have a little break with a little poll question, and then we'll continue with the process streamlining and how we go about corporate processes down to local processes. We'll look into the data conversion part as well as the integration, and then basically at the overall methodology. And then we'll finish our session with the questions and answers that we can basically, throughout the session, you can basically type in your question box any questions that arises, and we at the end will discuss and answer these questions at the question and answer session. So basically, what we are looking at is really to look at the objectives of a global deployment. First, from the corporate perspective, and that's very important. We need to understand who are our customers. We have the corporate who's pushing for implementing a global SuccessFactors implementation, and the receiving end, which is our local HR people and HR populations in the countries. So basically, what we are looking at is, from the corporate perspective, to have common standard processes across the organization when we can do that, and mainly that's really in the field of talent management processes, goal settings, performance management, certain learning processes, etc. On the administration side, these can be, of course, global, but they are very often then adapted at the local level. The second part is really to have a clear common data sets across the organization, and we will have to distinguish between what are corporate data sets as well as local legal requirements as well as functional requirements that you need at the local level. And then finally, of course, once we have collected all the data and we have used the system performing our processes, we are looking into having a view of all the populations across our organization and to be able to report on different dimensions. Let's say, for example, I want to know the turnover across my salespeople in the whole on the whole organization, or I want to see it only in one part of the world, or I want to see in a different family or different levels of the organizations. So this is something that we have to be very clear from the beginning and have clear definitions. So that's really from the global deployment perspective. From the local perspective, we really have to have an operational system. HR people don't want to have just an additional system that they need to maintain. They want to have, and people as well, our managers, our employees, they want to have a system that supports our daily operations. Basically, the data that we receive at the corporate level should be just the result of what we are processing in the system, and that should be basically driving the quality of the data. These systems should also address the local pain points. Some areas will have administrative efficiency to address, some others will have a lack of talent management processes at the local level, and they're waiting for the corporate to share with them that knowledge and share with them the processes. And it's also about engaging employees. All our employees across the organization should be treated the same way through standardized processes and standardized systems, basically. So that's really the two. From the corporate as well as from the local perspective. So at the end of the day, you have, instead of making it a global deployment, you should better call it a local deployment. It's really looking into thinking global, but of course acting locally. We have seen so many projects where it has been pushed by the corporate more as a reporting database than an operational system, and it is correct and the data and the information is good the first day it's launched, and right after that people stop using it, and it becomes then just a reporting database with not so good data, because of course it's not linked to the operations and the way we work in the local countries. So that's very important to take into consideration, and not just think anything that works out in the US will work necessarily for the other countries. So for example, we had an experience for a customer who wanted to roll out a compensation or salary review project across all the different countries, the 40 countries they had, and they didn't think that other countries may have more than 12 months a year to calculate from the monthly base salary to the annual salary, and that's something that you have to take into consideration, whereby some countries may have 13 months, some others 14, some sectors may have even 16 in the banking services. So these are things that you have to take into consideration when you configure your system and you plan for rolling it out. So basically what we are looking at is really at the different key success factors for this local deployment. The first one, of course, is the executive sponsorship, and we'll go into the details at a later stage. The change management is very important, the right change management. You're putting in place a new system which is going to change the organization and the way we do business. We need to take the right decisions from the beginning on the base system configuration. Make sure that what we're implementing and configuring in the system will meet our requirements. The next one is to have a clear global data dictionary with the right definitions to be understood by everyone. When I talk about a temporary person, what does it mean? Each country will understand it differently. When I talk about a contract person, what does it mean? Etc., etc. So we really have to be very clear once we're going to start deploying the system with our different countries. Just sending an email is not always just the easiest, the best way of doing it. You need to set up meetings and explain clearly the definitions. Understand and implement the relevant local data requirement, legal as well as functional. You have to be careful there, because sometimes you go to some countries, they will want to have so many different information. What you have to ask them is what is really required in terms of local data requirements, in terms of legal requirements, and it's not just a nice to have, as well as what is really functionally working, let's say components of salaries, etc., that are relevant within that country. So you have to be really make sure that you really have a good grasp of what is legal and functional for that specific country. It's also good to know it in advance and not go to the country and then ask the question at that stage. You should be already aware about what is specific to that country. And luckily with SuccessFactors, we will see it later, we have all that information already embedded within the system, where it takes care of the local requirements basically. The other part is really to standardize processes and basically apply when necessary the local gaps. That's, for example, if you go through a recruitment process in some countries, you need to inform prior to hiring the relevant government authorities. These kind of things have to be from the global process down to the local process analyzed, and making sure that our system is supporting the local operations, but at the same time within the framework of the global processes. And the next one, of course, is the perfect data conversion, because that's what the user sees and the employee sees. So you have to really spend time and make sure that the data conversion from the legacy systems to SuccessFactors is perfect. And then, of course, we want to avoid creating just another system, and we want to help our users to avoid having to double enter data in different systems. What we are looking at is to integrate it with other systems, either at the global systems or on the local systems. So that's really from our part of the key success factors. In terms of the executive sponsorship, this project should be pushed top-down, as it's really a project that's going to affect all the layers of the organization. It's not only a HR project, but it's really everybody's project. Everybody is the customer of this project. Of course, HR, which represents the organization, the top management, the managers, as well as our employees. So we are all basically going to be affected, and we're going to benefit from this project. So basically what is good is to put this project as a common objective across the organization. When you go into a global rollout, what will happen is that you're going to be having basically, if you don't put that as a common objective, you may have your team coming to roll it out within a country, whereby the country leader or the country manager not having that in his priorities or in his objectives, and that's where problem starts about assigning local resources to the project and making it as a success within that country. So basically, that's really something that usually done in some organizations, whereby such a big and important project is part of everybody's objectives. So that's from the executive sponsorship side. From the change management, as you know, putting in such a system is going to bring a big change to the organization, and a lot of projects fail because there is not the right change management put in place, and it's just just a systems implementation. But at the end of the day, it's affecting every day's for everyone life in terms of working in this environment. So basically, what we need is really to involve the parties from the beginning, which means it's not just a HR assistance. In some workshops, we may need to have some population champions as well as managers or top managers involved, so that they're aware of what's happening, either through communication, where we clearly communicate with all the parties, or within the workshop themselves to make them involved from the beginning. Of course, it's important to have clear roles and responsibilities. With the new system, certain roles will change. The way I was doing it before is changing. Tomorrow it's going to be different. And that's something that is important to be prepared for later delivering the right training, which has to be planned based on the roles. So you're not training a manager as you're going to train an employee, as you're going to train a HR business partner or HR administrator. So that's something that you have really to look into it in very detail. Efficient communication plan, of course, from the beginning to the go live period and even later, with all the enhancements, the frequently asked questions, etc., are part of the project. And of course, basically, from the detailed testing plan to the go live is to be and make sure that the system is robust enough and that allows us to go realistically live with that system and not just basically open it when we are not yet sure on how it works. So that's really on the change management side. So now if we go a little bit more in detail in the well, I would say in the more technicalities or details, we will start with the base system configuration. So when we are in the global rollout, one of the questions is what are the languages to be implemented? So of course you're going to have the base language if the corporate is in England, and more any international companies usually English is the base language. But because we are dealing, depending on your populations, depending if they're all English speakers, or you may have some population that don't speak, but you still want to roll out self-service, you may want to have to implement other languages. And of course, that is going to basically impact your implementation, because you're going to have to define which functions you want to have translated, which codes you want to have translated. And at the later stage, you're going to have to maintain the system. So you may have someone calling you from China asking you, oh, this screen in Chinese is not working, and you, on the other side of the world, you will not be able to support it because you don't know, you don't have the resource that is going to support it in Chinese. So again, you have to be very careful on not agreeing from the beginning that you're going to open all the languages. You have really to make sure that you study what languages have to be open on which modules, and to be prepared for the impact in terms of the implementation as well as the maintenance. So that's really from the, I would say, from the language perspective. From the base configuration as well, as we are moving into what we call a global system, we have to really enforce for successful implementations. Some customers ask us to have logic in their global IDs and unique IDs. Oh, if he's in this country, I want to have this ID, if he's in this other one, etc., etc. From our experience, the only way to go is really to enforce a global unique employee ID, and basically just have it as a running number, sequential number. An employee who's in your organization will keep it all his life. He starts in the country, he goes out, comes back, his rehire, transfers, etc., he will always keep that same employee ID. So basically, that's something that we will hold. And so for our customers, usually what we do is the person ID as well as what we call the user ID is going to be one unique identifier across the organization, which is just basically a sequential number. The other important part is basically our people are going to log in using a username. And then basically that username, what you want to have it is if you have a central identity management system, is it Active Directory, is it LDAP, is it any of these central identity management systems for security purposes, you need really to make sure that you have it in sync, that your username that you're going to use in your system, in SuccessFactors, is going to be in sync with that user identity management system. And again, at a later stage, you may even have it integrated so that basically the password, you don't have to maintain passwords or other things within SuccessFactors, but it's going to read it directly from your central systems. Again, depending on organizations, some are still not yet there with the centralized system for the global. Some use SuccessFactors projects to drive the fact that you're going to have a centralized system for identity management. So there are different ways. So here in this example, what we have done is that the users, the HR users, wanted to drive the username creation as well as the email creations to be sent from SuccessFactors then to their centralized systems. So basically, that's something where what you can be done within our SuccessFactors. So that's something that you will depend on your roles, etc. Of course, we need to interface to local systems, and therefore, what's important is to be able to store local IDs and basically to have them then interface back to local systems. So in this example, for example, my payroll system is ADP. This employee is employee 3024, and basically his file number is ADP is 10,922. Tomorrow he goes in another region in the US or another country, he may be still in ADP, but it's going to generate another file number. But the employee will stay always under the same person ID or the same employee ID. So that's very important. Another part which is important is all the data loss and hosting issues that you may have encountering in some countries. So you may have to analyze it before getting into the implementation. For example, if you go to France, you may have to fill in what we call a declaration of the system with all the fields that you're going to be holding, and make sure that you get that approved before you're going to go live with the system. In Germany, you'll have to work with the work councils to make sure that it gets approved by the work council before launching this system. So each country will have its own specific challenges in terms of data laws, as well as where you host the data. Okay, so the next one, now that we have the base systems starting, we will have to have a clear definition, and that's our data dictionary. So we will have what we call a global data dictionary as well as local fields. So this is just as an example. Here we will go through personal details, and in each of the personal details we have a certain set of fields. And in this set of fields we'll have to have a clear definition. We will have to define if it's global or is it country specific, and then basically you will have to be very clear, and that's going to be shared across the whole organization between all the HR people who are going to maintain the data, or in terms of that this data will be used either for reporting, for generating mail merge and communications, or it can be used for interfaces back to your local payrolls, etc. So that should be all documented in our implementation roadmap, and we should have that as one specific document. Basically, in terms of the data, when it gets into the local data dictionary, there will be some functional requirements, for example, names, and that's something, a topic that usually takes a long time when we go into implementations. Of course, we'll have the personal information screens, whereby we will be having the different name components, and we know that some countries have name, first name, last names. Some countries don't have first name, last names; they just have name. So how do you manage that? Again, in some countries, you're going to be typing it into what we call the alternate language, into the local language, which is here Mandarin or Chinese, or you may have it in Cyrillic or whatever. So because you want to have the system helping not only at the corporate level to collect the name, but you want to maybe generate some local documentation using the local names, or you want to search by name using the local character instead of using the English character. So that's something that can be completely managed by your SuccessFactor. Another one is the address, for example. If you look at the country address for the United States, it has a certain format. If you look at it from Singapore, for example, it's a different format of address. So again, the system is all set and has already quite a number of countries, or most of the countries, already configured for that. Same goes for the legal and regulatory requirements. You will never be able to ask all the countries to give you ethnic groups, for example, or religion, but these are very specific to the country and needed by the country for local reporting. But at the group level, countries like France or like people in countries in Europe, some countries will be able to provide the data and some others will not. So therefore it cannot be a global data to be collected, for example. These are really local data elements to be collected. So I think it's time for a little break, and we're going to have 10-15 seconds for you to please respond to this question, which is how do you collect your global employee data. Kara will basically launch the poll, and then she will share with us the results.
We'll give a few more minutes, Hisham. Looks like
Sure.
answering, or a few more seconds. Sorry. Okay, I think there's enough data here. Let me launch the poll here. And I will share the results. It looks like about 25% had said Excel and 75% answered with other system. And I'm going to go ahead and hide the poll.
Okay. So yeah, thank you everyone for answering the poll, and yeah, Excel is still a very popular tool to collect the data. Okay, so here we have seen from the base system configuration, from the data perspective, and the next is really to look at it from the processes perspective. It's important to have a system, as we said, it's an operational system and not just a data reporting system, so it should support my processes. So usually, if we go by the standard methodology, and then the number of iterations can vary, we are looking here at 3 iterations. The first one is really where we work with the corporate HR, with the process teams, process lead and project team, and that's where we define the global process templates. So let's say a performance management template, or is it a compensation review template, or whatever process it is to be defined there. We go and work with a team, with the corporate HR and with the project lead, with the project team to define that template and basically run the process within SuccessFactors. And then basically once we run it, we will just finalize the global process configuration by looking if there were some gaps or some changes to be made. And that will form the basis to basically roll it out or to start to present it to our global HR folks and the process leads. So basically here, if we go to the compensation benefits, if we go for the salary review, we go through the compensation and benefit specialists from the global, from the different countries or regions, and we will run the same process for the second iteration with the project team, and when possible, include some population champion. Is it managers in this case for the salary review? Is it an employee if we do performance appraisals? So that we can basically run the finalized global process in SuccessFactors. So what we do is we run the global process, and then we identify the gaps between the global process and the local process. And that's basically where, for example, in performance management, corporate may have thought about having a section on certain sets of data, let's say corporate values, and basically in some countries you can still comment on it, define on it, but you cannot rate it, but corporate wants to rate it. So we will have to discuss the gaps. Or for example, we worked on the global template for the compensation salary review, and what happens, India has multiple salary components that make up the base salary. So again, how do I adapt the global process as well as the global template to make it fit the situation in India? So that's something that we have to do, and through our workshops to do that second step, which is really from the global process look into the local process and therefore adapt it again. Once we have done that, we have a third iteration, which is basically to run what we call our local processes, which is the global with that layer of local process integrated within the process. And again, of course, we will have to refine the configuration, and that's where, depending on the complexity of the company, depending on the industry, depending on the spread of the population, it may require multiple iterations. It can be done all centrally, or it will require work on sites. So it will be depending again on the complexity of the organization we're working with. And then basically once we are ready with that, we're going to be moving it to production, which is basically our final life system. So that's something that is really to be done, and basically that's where we integrate both global as well as local in terms of an operational system and make sure we make the best use of SuccessFactors. SuccessFactors comes already with the best practices, and of course from the global as well as local we still have to adapt it a little bit, and therefore we come up with a good operational system for our people. One of the, I would say, the biggest challenges always is the data conversion. And then again here, having done so many conversions so many years, basically it starts all by the import templates. So usually SuccessFactors will provide with a whole set of templates to be to load the data. You will have the foundation table, like the department structure, etc., and we will have also anything to do with employee information. We will have the personal details, names, name it, job details, etc. So two approaches is, one approach is just to give to the users. At the end of the day, the HR department will have to populate this table. And it's always a headache because either they have multiple systems or they don't have someone technical enough to provide the data, etc. So for us, from Micro Excel side, there are two options when you start a project with us. Either we go to the standard template process, or we provide you with simplified templates, which then are basically reworked and then reworked in the system. So depend on that, you can use either you're going to receive 20 templates to put employee information, or we may give you a simplified one with only 3 templates, which makes it easier. And from these 3 templates, we will generate the 10 or 20 other SuccessFactors import templates. Of course, you will have to extract the data from your source systems. Again, and you have to have extraction scripts because you're going to run through several iterations of data conversion, and you don't want to redo everything all the time. So you need really to save your queries or your scripts to be able to rerun them in different times. Then basically there is of course the whole data formatting, or we call it data massaging, and that's really where you're going to have to map the fields, transcode them, create some rules to basically fit into the SuccessFactors part. So again, it's something that either we do for you or you have to do it directly into the SuccessFactors template, and that's what's going to make the difference between an implementation where you leave it to your HR people to do it, or you want to have your service delivery or your partner to do it. Then of course the data importing side, where we will be loading all the data, analyze error logs, and then we will inform the users, and then that goes into the data cleansing mode, where you need to update the data in the source system. Either in the source system, when the data is present in the source system, it's better always to update it. But sometimes I don't even have the data. Let's say I don't have a good structure for job codes, levels, name it, cost centers, whatever. So I may have to prepare data into an Excel file, which I will then use. So that's a very, very important step in implementations, and because that's what from the employee to the manager to the HR people, that's the data that we see in the system, and we want to make it as good as possible to make it successful. Usually a bad data conversion will always raise into what do you call that, a failure in projects. So you have to be spend the necessary time and make sure you put the necessary efforts on the data conversion part. As even here, we are not only on domestic, we're going to be at the global level. So you can imagine the number of different systems that we can have, the different type of fields, formats, and things like that that you're going to have. So that's something very important to look at. Again, another part, it's about the integration. Today, if you put in system in place, is to streamline some processes, avoid doing double entries, make sure that you can, the data that you put in one system is reflected into the other systems. So the first one is, of course, to look at the global systems. What are the global systems that we have that consume or use employee information? It can be, as we mentioned earlier, your identity management systems. As soon as you hire someone, you want to have that person be created in your identity management system. When that person is terminated, you want to make sure we close all the access to that person. If he's transferred, his hierarchy and to whom he reports or which department he's in, it should be transferred. So that's something that has to be part also included in the project. It can be into your financial systems, your expenses systems, any system that is global that is using HR data should be populated directly from your central SuccessFactors database. Then comes the complexity of the local systems. Depending on the customers, some customers want to have basically SuccessFactors as the master, and therefore what happens is that by using Employee Centrals in SuccessFactors as the master core data, we will have to interface back into the payroll system, or even if we use the benefits, for example, module, we'll be interfacing to benefit providers. Again, if you are not using Employee Central, that's the opposite. So you don't have to, it's going to be the reverse. We're going to take the data from your payroll system and then push it into what we call the employee basic info or the employee profile to make sure you can use the other modules around it. So depending again on what systems and what modules you're going to put in place for your global rollout, the strategy of integrating the data will be different, either one way or the other, or sometimes we have some customers who have even a hybrid situation where they will be master for certain countries in SuccessFactors, and they will be basically sending the data from payroll in some other countries into SuccessFactors. So you can have also combinations of integrations there. So that's in terms of the integration part. Sorry. Okay. So just to finish, in fact, what we are having is basically we are applying the SAP launch methodology, which is the standard one, but this one has to be adapted to the global rollout. So which means that when we do the prepare phase and when we do the configuration workshop, that's where we work with the corporate HR to basically prepare the processes and basically run the global process. So at the prepare phase, what we have is collecting all that information, and after the kickoff meeting, what we do is we run our corporate processes within SuccessFactors. Usually we tend to try to have at least already some sample data to make it a little bit more attractive, and we run basically your processes. And from there, at the end of this phase, we will go into the realize phase, which we will take that configuration based on the global process, and we're going to run different iterations so that we come up with these local templates, which includes the global process as well as the local specific side of it, as well as if we need certain fields, additional fields for the local, we will add them, but most of them are already present in SuccessFactors, unless it's a country that is not in SuccessFactors. We will work also on the different runs of the data migration, as we mentioned, and we will prepare the integration part. And then, after these iterations, what will happen is we will have once we are happy about the results, we will be basically doing we call the user acceptance testing, which is really our final iteration before going live, whereby we should be able to basically roll all the different processes, and they should meet the requirements for each of the countries. Very important, of course, is the integration testing and making sure that this is all working fine, and then to go live training, it's prepare all our users for the go live phase, which is our launch phase. And that's basically you're going to have a go live phase, or you're going to plan for the go live. There's a whole part of the customer success transition, which we're going to secure, and there's a warranty for a certain period, and then the go live support, which will help you basically go smoothly into live with the system. So that's basically in terms of the methodology, which is adapted from if it was just domestic, but you would have it also at a domestic level if you do it in a phased approach, where you would have a global, a corporate HR, and then depending, because you have different industries or different businesses within your same group, you may launch and do different iterations until you get it right for the different groups. So again, it's going from the project readiness to configuration acceptance, to the integration testing, and then basically to the product readiness acceptance. So these are our checkpoints to roll the whole project. So I think from my side, I will probably hand it over to. So basically, to the question and answers. So if you can have from your side any questions or any challenges that you're meeting today with your global rollouts, or any questions, functional or technical, please don't hesitate to drop us your questions, and that we will answer right after that. And then basically, for any additional questions, you can contact Abe Rugas at microexcel.com, or myself, hisham.mooden@microexcel.com.
Yeah, thanks, Hisham, and thanks for the insight and the presentation. And I know we saw a couple questions come in throughout the webinar, so I'll ask Kara from our marketing team to go ahead and read those. And as Hisham noted, if there's any questions that you want to ask, even post the webinar, don't hesitate to reach out to us at the email addresses listed. Kara?
Thanks, Abe. We do have a couple that came in, and I'll read those in order here. The first one is, do you have a best practices template that we can use in our change management process?
Yes, definitely. So basically, the whole change management process is part of the project itself, which has its own templates, specific templates, starting from the communication plan, training plan templates, and the whole testing plans, etc. So that's all part of our standard delivery method.
Okay, thanks, Hisham. Looks like the next one has to do with resources. What local and global resources do I need to appoint or have on my project team?
So in terms, usually as we are here in iteration workshops, and basically we are doing several rounds of iterations, what we need is really the process owners and the decision makers in terms of the processes. So it's in terms of the global, let's say, take compensation benefits, I'm going to take the compensation benefit for the salary review at the corporate level, who is the process owner for the salary review process, as well as then from the local perspective, I will need to include in our workshops his counterpart within the countries. So we need really the process owners and as well as the decision makers. Of course, in terms of the data conversion and in terms of the integration, etc., we may have to, we will have to speak to more the operational people who are doing the job, but from running the iterations of the process workflow, it's usually the process owners that we need to have.
Thanks for that. Okay. Let's see. Oh, here's one that just came in. What is a typical length of a global rollout?
That really depends on the, on the size of the organization and how they are structured. It's either very centralized organization and a lot of the processes are driven down from the corporate, or it's a very decentralized organization where it has been through, acquisitions and things like that. So that's really depends. So the shortest that we had is really three months. And it depends also if you need to have a heavy integration or not. And a typical implementation, let's say for a module like Employee Central, at least to have the core modules in place for a large organization, I would say 1,000 to more than 5,000 employees or even more. We usually go by 6 months for the first part of the implementation, and then we go by 3 months type of releases of new modules and new functions.
Thanks, Hisham. Let's see, we have time for a couple more questions, so if you can go ahead and type those into the question panel, that would be great. Let's see. Okay, here's one. Will I receive formal progress reports at each stage of the implementation?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the implementation, we have a weekly state. I mean, basically throughout the implementation, what we have is, of course, I mean, as these projects are being shorter than a standard global ERP type of rollouts, what we have is a standard weekly progress report that is communicated, which is basically discussed through the weekly operational meeting and project management meeting, as well as depending on the length of the project, we would have steering comms on a monthly basis usually, or on a more frequent basis in case of issues arising. But at least the minimum is a weekly report on the project progress status, which is shared with different parties.
Okay, thank you, Hisham. There's one more that came in. Do you have ROI stats on the benefits of rolling out a global HR solution?
We have different type of ROIs, and usually they are based on the modules. So we have made some ROIs on basically rolling out a global recruitment system, as well as a performance appraisal system. So yes, we have global ROIs, but usually what we do is we tend to do them by modules.
Thank you. We do have, like I said, a couple more minutes if you'd like to type in a question. Okay, Abe, I think that's it. Back to you.
All right, fantastic. Well, again, thanks everyone for joining us today. I hope the information was helpful and insightful, and at least got you to think about some things if you're looking at your own global deployments and things that you're taking in consideration as you plan. There is a short survey that we ask you to kindly complete. It'll help us provide, get some feedback and take that information and see if we can apply that to make our future webinars even more impactful. Our contact details, as we said, are on the screen, so please don't hesitate to reach out if there's any questions post the webinar. And as well as a link to the replay of this webinar will be emailed to you, shortly thereafter. So again, thanks everyone for attending this morning, and look for future webinars from MicroExcel. Have a great day.